Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So Medvedev's press conference in the new Silicon Valley, what the Russians, Soviets used to call science cities, good things, but you don't need Silicon Valley. The Soviets were actually better at it than the U.S. in many ways. So Medvedev says, since the U.S. is determined to build anti-ballistic missile systems starting in Romania, and place these interceptors. This is directed against Russia. This is detrimental to the Russian capacity for self-defense. It could completely invalidate the START Treaty. And, of course, the preamble to the START Treaty says that there is a linkage, a junctim, a definite linkage between the offensive nuclear weapons and the defensive ones. So if you think you're going to sign a treaty on the offensive missiles and then go outside of that and build up your defensive anti-ballistic missile park, then you have another thing coming, says Medvedev. He's been forced to do this. Essentially, the line of firmness is the Putin line. Medvedev, of course, axiomatically thought that the West was a partner, that there was a reasonable, rational interlocutor in Washington. Well, there is not. Medvedev basically having to say that his entire reset diplomacy has come to nothing, ashes and dust. Putin was right, and he's got to sound more and more like Putin. He can't say, I disagree with Putin about Libya. He's got to say, Putin and I agree on just about everything. So that's important. Now, Medvedev also says, better late than never, there will be no UN resolution regarding Syria. It will be blocked. I hope it will be vetoed. But he says we will make sure that there's no resolution regarding Syria in the same way that there was for Libya. Well, as Ambassador Chamov had said, it really was not very wise for Russia to support that anti-Libyan resolution. The Russian railways were building several $1 billion of projects in Libya. Libya was looking to buy surface-to-air anti-aircraft defense missiles from Russia. All of that, of course, out the window now that we have our dear friends at the Libyan Rebel Council in Benghazi. We've got Jibril, Hifter, Yunus, and Jalil, this gang with Al-Qaeda, right? Half of their council, presumably from Al-Qaeda and the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group. So no resolution on Syria. Notice, though, Putin and the line of firmness are better for world peace. Let's suppose Russia had vetoed that resolution. The Chinese are not situated to do this. The Chinese are not going to veto something unless it regards China, right? If it had something to do with Tibet or Taiwan or something like this, then they would veto. But if it's going to be Libya, the Chinese, they're just not going to do it. Whereas Russia, fiercely independent, unconquered, winner of World War II, all of these things have a habit of doing this stuff. Lavrov would be perfectly capable of vetoing it. If they had vetoed it, the Chinese might have joined in, or they would have at least been in sympathetic support, and that would have made it impossible for a lot of the smaller NATO countries, even the larger ones, Italy. But, for example, Italy would have had a very hard time letting the British, the French, and the U.S. use the Italian air bases if there had not been the cover of the Security Council resolution. Places like Belgium and the Netherlands and Norway and Qatar and all of these other places, they would have had a very hard time participating in the attack, the genocidal attack on Libya, if it hadn't been for that UN resolution. So the line of firmness would have served world peace better. And you look back through the decade of the Audis from 2001 and 9/11 on, the Putin line of firmness advanced the cause of world peace. The soft line of giving the U.S. what they want, the Medvedev line of unilateral concessions, is not successful. It makes the world a more dangerous place. Now, the other one is the question on Khodorkovsky. Khodorkovsky, the Russian oligarch, right? What did he want to do? Well, he wanted to sell the oil of Siberia to Chevron at bargain basement prices, right? He wanted to essentially sacrifice the inherent wealth of the Russian people, fill his own pockets, betray the country. He also wanted to organize a coup d'etat. He said, Berlusconi is the richest man in Italy. He gets to be the boss. I want to be the boss. I'm the richest man here. Well, unfortunately, it's not a bidding contest. It's a great nation. So Medvedev is asked, do you think that Khodorkovsky is a public menace? And he says, no. Now, Putin had correctly said that guy should stay in jail. And here's why he should stay in jail. Here's the scenario now. If Khodorkovsky were to be released from jail, from prison in Russia, the obvious next move would be for the CIA to make him into the hero of a color revolution to destabilize Russia. He would become the new Suu Kyi. He would become, I don't know what, the new Cory Aquino or something like this. He would become what Benazir Bhutto thought she was becoming. The heroine of an upheaval of this sort. Right now, with Kasparov and Limonov and these people, the U.S. destabilization of Russia, the direct color revolution inside Russia, is going nowhere. But you look at that pack of journalists, you look at the people from Nezavisimaya Gazeta and so on down the line, they're touching sympathy for Khodorkovsky. And, of course, the international stuff we know, right, the Ann Applebaum and the Washington Post, they think that the fate of Khodorkovsky is the acid test of human rights in Russia. All right, so that's Medvedev, and he doesn't say whether he's going to run for president. If he does, that will be a key moment because the Russian people will then have a clear choice. We've also got one of the Russian oligarchs now. They got the Russian oligarch who owns the New Jersey Nets. Says that he wants to create a party for Medvedev and help him to become president for a new term. Now let's switch gears. Dominique Strauss-Kahn. The entire business around Dominique Strauss-Kahn is not a soap opera. It is a coup d'etat. It is a coup d'etat by the United States at the International Monetary Fund, and its goal is to target the euro, to smash up the euro, so much so that I hope people in Europe are watching. If you're out there saying down with the euro, you should be embarrassed that you're in a united front with Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and J.P. Morgan, because that's their line, too. Go back to the idea dinner at Moness, Crespi, and Hart. So DSK, well, what can we say? Is he a monster? Yeah, I suppose he is. Personally, I don't put too much stock in the idea that he had a Damascus Road conversion. He was, of course, getting close to running for president of France. That's the other thing. The ouster of Dominique Strauss-Kahn, who would have had to run the IMF over the next several months in a way that would prevent the collapse of Europe if he wanted to become the president of France. Otherwise, he'd be blamed for it. The U.S. wants to destroy the euro as quickly as possible. The other thing, of course, is Sarkozy, having grown up in a CIA family with the Wisners running around, right, growing up in the bosom of the CIA, it's going to be hard to get anybody with those credentials. Strauss-Kahn was considered an automatic shoo-in to take over as president of France. So we have a double coup, un golpe doble, the International Monetary Fund and France, and this allows then limitless attacks on the euro. If anybody had immunity, Strauss-Kahn had immunity. He's got the UN. He's a UN public servant. The IMF is part of the United Nations. Those guys have diplomatic passports. He had immunity. That's just brushed aside. Notice Qatar or Qatar. The people from Qatar here in Washington, there are diplomats from Qatar who have been accused of sexual assault of family servants. For Qatar, it's treated as a civil matter. It's not even criminal. That's in the federal courts of the District of Columbia here. So it's obvious double standard. It's a NATO coup. We'll be back in just a minute on World Crisis Radio.